I sat frozen at the lavish dining table, my fingers gripping the smooth silk of the napkin on my lap as I stared at the gleaming chandelier above. The murmur of conversation had died down, replaced by an unbearable tension, thick like the rich aroma of roasted meat wafting from the silver platters in front of us. My uncle's voice echoed through the ornate dining hall, bouncing off the gilded walls lined with ancestral portraits. My ears buzzed, my cheeks flushed hot with humiliation. "He's nothing but a failure," my uncle's voice thundered, loud enough for even the catering staff to pause awkwardly, trays in hand. The clinking of utensils halted, the air thick with unspoken words. "He's a mistake, always has been." An icy silence descended over the table, broken only by the uncomfortable shifting of chairs and the whisper of judgmental murmurs. The polished mahogany surface reflected the flickering candlelight, an ironic contrast to the coldness in my uncle's tone. My aunt stared down at her plate, absent-mindedly pushing a piece of roasted potato with her fork, unable to meet my eyes. My cousins glanced between my uncle and me, faces pale, mouths open in stunned shock, the tension palpable like an approaching storm. I felt the heat creeping up my neck, a firestorm of humiliation and anger roiling beneath my skin. But instead of shouting back, instead of defending myself or begging him to stop, I simply stood up, calmly folded my napkin with precision, and walked toward the grand double doors that led toward the grand double doors that led to the corridor. The soft rustle of my chair against the plush carpet was the only sound as I moved. I heard him scoff behind me. "See, he can't even stand up for himself." His words burned deep, each syllable like a lash across my back. But I kept moving forward. My heartbeat thundered in my ears as I pushed through the grand dining hall doors and into the cold, moonlit night. The scent of jasmine from the nearby garden mixed with the distant hum of city traffic, but my hands trembled, breath uneven, chest tight with unspent words. Once outside, I leaned against my car, staring at the sleek black paint reflecting the glow of the estate's lanterns, fighting tears that threatened to spill. But crying was exactly what he wanted, proof he had won. I wouldn't give him that satisfaction. Not again. I'd spent years trying to please my uncle, working tirelessly to meet his impossible standards, but no matter how hard I pushed myself, nothing was ever enough. Every accomplishment, every effort reduced to failure in his eyes. This night was just the breaking point, the last piece of my shattered self, esteem falling to the ground like broken glass. I drove home in numb silence, the city lights blurring past like ghostly streaks. When I reached my small apartment, I slumped onto the couch, staring blankly at the cracked ceiling, the soft hum of the fridge filling the void. For hours, I replayed the scene in my head, anger and sadness swirling in my heart like a violent storm that refused to settle. The next morning, my best friend Jason called. His voice was warm, steady, grounding. "Hey, you okay? I heard what happened." "I'm fine," I lied, forcing a neutral tone, tracing the ridges of my coffee cup absent-mindedly. But Jason knew better. "Come on, don't let him get to you. Listen, I'm picking you up. We're going to grab coffee and figure this out together." Jason was my rock, the only person who knew the real me beneath the carefully constructed facade. I reluctantly agreed, grateful for his support. We met at our favorite cafe, a cozy little spot where the scent of fresh-baked pastries clung to the air. The owner greeted us with warm smiles, the bell above the door chiming softly as we stepped inside. Jason nudged me gently, his expression expectant. Cheer up. Things always get better. Easy for you to say. I sighed, staring into the swirls of my latte. I have no money, no career, no prospects. Uncle wasn't entirely wrong. Jason shook his head, defiant. You're not a failure. You're just stuck. Maybe what you need is a little luck. He pulled out two lottery tickets and slid one toward me with a playful grin, the paper crisp between his fingers. I bought one for each of us this morning. Hey, who knows? Maybe you're about to become a millionaire. I laughed bitterly, dismissing his optimism. Lottery, seriously? Why not? Jason insisted, stirring sugar into his coffee. It's not like things could get worse. I shrugged humorlessly, taking the ticket between my fingers. Fine, here's to hoping. For a moment, I stared at the tiny paper in my hand, the numbers a blur. It seemed absurd, naive even. I'd always believed in hard work, in building my own success. But right now, the thought of leaving my life to chance felt oddly comforting. 2 days passed in a blur of hopelessness, replaying my uncle's harsh words. Yet, in a strange twist of fate, Jason called me early Tuesday morning, his voice breathless. Check your lottery ticket. The numbers are out, I laughed dryly, barely paying attention. Yeah, like I could ever win. Just do it, he urged, unusually intense. With a sigh, I opened the lottery app on my phone, punched in my numbers, and froze. My heart hammered violently in my chest, breath catching painfully in my throat. Jason, I whispered, my voice shaking. What? Did you win $20? He laughed jokingly. No, Jason, it says I won. My voice broke. $1 million. Stop joking. Jason said, skeptical yet hopeful. I'm serious. My vision blurred, tears suddenly spilling down my cheeks. I just, I won, Jason. I just won $1 million. The line went silent for several stunned seconds before Jason erupted into joyous laughter. You see, I told you, you deserve this. A powerful wave of emotions swept over me. Relief, shock, disbelief, and then determination. I wasn't the failure my uncle claimed. I had worth. And now I finally had the chance to prove it. 2 days later, I had my moment. The family had gathered again, this time at my uncle's sprawling mansion, supposedly for another dinner. The scent of grilled steak lingered in the air, glasses of wine gleaming in the soft chandelier light. My uncle's eyes narrowed when he saw me walking in, a silent question in his gaze. But I ignored it, calmly stepping to the front of the room, where everyone could see me. Ah, he returns, he sneered sarcastically. Come back for another lesson. No, I replied firmly, confidence surging through me for the first time in my life. I'm here to show you exactly who you underestimated. He smirked dismissively. What? Did you finally get a job at a fast food joint? My smile widened, enjoying the moment. Actually, Uncle, I just won $1 million, and guess what? I'm starting my own business, something you'll never be able to control. Gasps erupted around the table. Even my aunt stared, eyes wide with shock. My uncle's face went pale, the smug expression melting into disbelief. Impossible. I met his gaze steadily, feeling an exhilarating strength I'd never known before. The flickering candlelight cast long shadows across the table, accentuating the deep lines of his face as his expression faltered. You called me a failure, a mistake, But the only mistake was yours for never believing in me. He slumped into his chair, speechless, while around me, voices rose in excited congratulations. Jason rushed to hug me tightly, pride glowing in his eyes, his grip reassuring, grounding me in this surreal moment. You did it, he whispered softly, his voice filled with warmth and conviction. I turned back to my uncle, watching him sink deeper into stunned silence, his fingers curling tightly around the edge of the table. From now on, no one decides my worth but me. My voice was unwavering, carrying through the grand dining hall with newfound authority. In that moment, victory wasn't just about money, it was about reclaiming myself. The gleaming chandelier above caught the light in just the right way, as if illuminating the turning point of my life. My uncle's harsh words had been the fire igniting something powerful inside me, and now I was finally free. The only mistake was underestimating what I was capable of. I'd won far more than $1 million. I'd won back my dignity. 2 days earlier, if you had told me that I'd be standing confidently in front of my family, holding up undeniable proof of my newfound fortune, I would have laughed bitterly. Life had never favored me before. I'd always been the quiet disappointment, the one who was invited out of obligation, never expectation. Yet here I was, heart pounding, the lottery ticket still raised high, and the very people who mocked me now frozen, mouths agape, their previous smugness wiped clean. The stunned silence around the table was like music to my ears, an unexpected symphony of justice. You're lying, my uncle finally managed, forcing the words through clenched teeth, his knuckles white against the tablecloth. Why would I lie? I challenged, my voice surprisingly steady. You taught me better than that, right? Lying would be beneath even your low opinion of me. The room stirred uncomfortably. My cousins exchanged embarrassed glances, their eyes darting between me and my uncle. Aunt Margaret shifted uneasily in her chair, the delicate clink of her bracelet, the only sound breaking the tense silence. But I was past caring. They had all silently agreed with my uncle's cruel words 2 nights ago. None of them had stepped in to defend me when I was humiliated, labeled a mistake in front of everyone. This was my redemption, raw, unapologetic, undeniable. My uncle opened his mouth, clearly searching for something cutting to say, something to reduce me once again to his definition of worthlessness. But this time nothing came out. For once, his booming voice failed him. For once, my quiet victory had reduced him to speechlessness. I turned away, not bothering to linger for their reactions. I'd said everything that needed saying. The grandeur of the estate faded behind me as I stepped outside, where the cool night air brushed my cheeks, refreshing and liberating. The stars above seemed brighter than ever, as if the universe itself had acknowledged my triumph. But my victory was tempered by the lingering pain of betrayal. Could money truly erase years of being invisible, undervalued? My phone vibrated urgently in my pocket, pulling me from my thoughts. Jason again, his voice anxious. So, how did it go? Tell me everything. I laughed softly, the sound shaky yet genuine. It was satisfying. He squealed on the other end. You should have taken pictures. I would have paid to see their faces. I smiled despite myself. Believe me, I'll remember their expressions forever. But even as we laughed, my thoughts drifted back to the deeper wound my uncle had inflicted. Money had given me the momentary satisfaction of revenge, but it hadn't healed the ache of rejection. Was this what winning felt like? I wasn't sure yet. That night, alone in my modest apartment, I sat staring at the lottery ticket. $1 million. The number looked surreal on the paper. The dim glow of my bedside lamp flickered slightly, as if mirroring my doubts. Was this the universe's apology? A way of balancing the scales after years of pain? Or was it simply luck, cold and indifferent? I had two choices now: let my newfound fortune define me, or seize the chance to build something meaningful, something of my own making, beyond anyone's judgment. The next morning, I cashed in my ticket. The bank teller smiled warmly as the numbers transferred into my account. It felt surreal, seeing those zeros lined up behind my name. I'd gone from invisible to powerful overnight. Yet, the hollow ache of my uncle's words persisted, urging me forward. I spent the entire day researching investments, charities, and causes close to my heart. I wanted to make this windfall count, not just for my heart, not just for myself, but to ensure no one else had to endure the humiliation. The hum of my laptop filled the quiet apartment as I pored over pages of financial advice, determined to make this more than just a fleeting stroke of luck. That afternoon, while browsing through charities, my phone buzzed. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the caller ID. Uncle. Hello. My voice was steady, colder than I'd intended. Silence stretched on the line, heavy and tense, before he finally spoke, his voice strained, almost reluctant. I suppose congratulations are in order. You're only calling because I won, I snapped bitterly, gripping my phone tighter. He sighed deeply. Look, I didn't mean you did, I interrupted firmly. You meant every word. He paused, clearing his throat awkwardly. Maybe I was harsh, but you must admit, winning a lottery doesn't exactly prove you're successful. My grip tightened on the phone. Even now, he couldn't acknowledge my worth. It's not the lottery win that's my success, I said, my voice unwavering. It's realizing my worth doesn't depend on your approval. You can't take this from me, Uncle. Before he could respond, I hung up, feeling an empowering sense of control surge through me. My uncle's validation no longer mattered. I'd spent my life seeking it, craving it desperately, and it had gotten me nowhere. That night, Jason and I celebrated at our favorite cafe. Champagne flutes in hand, he toasted cheerfully to new beginnings. But as I raised my glass, movement caught my attention at the cafe entrance. My aunt. She stood there, looking anxious and hesitant, her hands clasped tightly in front of her. I'll be right back, I murmured, standing up, my heartbeat quickening. She met me halfway, her eyes glistening with regret. I'm sorry, she said softly, voice barely above a whisper. I've let him speak for us both for too long. My throat tightened. Why didn't you ever say something? She lowered her gaze, guilt flickering across her features. Fear, weakness. But seeing you stand strong that night, it made me realize how wrong we've all been. Emotion swelled in my chest. Aunt, I just wanted you to believe in me. I always did, she said, eyes shimmering. I just didn't know how to stand up against him. I hugged her fiercely, feeling the years of resentment melt into forgiveness as the faint scent of her familiar perfume lingered between us. We can figure it out now. Together, the weight of unspoken emotions pressed against my chest, but for the first time, I felt lighter, freer. 2 days earlier, I had been humiliated, my life seemingly in ruins. Today, I stood transformed, not because of $1 million lottery ticket, but because I'd finally chosen to define myself beyond anyone else's perception. As I returned to Jason, my aunt by my side, I felt a profound shift within myself. The night air carried the distant hum of the city, yet everything around me felt clearer, sharper. This wasn't just luck, it was a second chance, a wake up call that had finally awakened my inner strength. This was my new beginning, and this time I was writing the story. Over the next few days, my life transformed at a dizzying pace. Word about my lottery win spread quickly, prompting phone calls from distant relatives I hadn't heard from in years, each suddenly eager to reconnect. It was amusing at first, but soon became exhausting, as it felt like everyone wanted something from me now, that I was no longer a failure in their eyes. Despite the chaos, I held on to the fierce determination I'd found within myself that night at my uncle's mansion. I refused to let anyone dictate how I should live my life again. This was my opportunity, and I was going to use it wisely. I bought a modest house away from the city, nestled in a quiet neighborhood where the only sounds were the rustling leaves and chirping birds in the morning. It was a place where I could breathe, rebuild without distractions. But even as I settled into my new surroundings, arranging furniture and unpacking boxes, I felt restless, driven by something deeper than money could fix. It was the lingering ache of rejection, the need to prove to myself, not just to my family, that I wasn't defined by their harsh judgments. A week later, while organizing my new home office, a familiar face appeared at my doorstep. It was my younger cousin Emily. Unlike the others, she hadn't reached out since the disastrous dinner. Seeing her standing there, anxious yet hopeful, softened my heart a little. "I wasn't expecting you," I said, holding the door open reluctantly. "I needed to apologize in person," she admitted quietly, avoiding my gaze. "I shouldn't have let Uncle talk to you like that." I studied her carefully, sensing genuine remorse. "You could have stood up for me." She winced. "I know. I'm not proud of myself." An awkward silence stretched between us, the weight of unspoken guilt lingering in the air. Finally, I sighed, stepping aside. "Come in." Emily hesitated, her eyes wide as she took in my new home. "You've done well for yourself." "It's just money," I replied softly, glancing around the cozy but modest space. "It doesn't erase anything." She turned to me suddenly, eyes brimming with sincerity. "I came to ask for your forgiveness, not your money. I've always admired your independence, even if I never said it. I guess I was too afraid to go against Uncle." I felt a wave of conflicting emotions, anger, resentment, but beneath it, a deep yearning for connection. Emily had always been Uncle's favorite, his golden child. Hearing her admit fear, vulnerability, and admiration was something entirely new. "Forgiveness takes time," I finally said, my voice gentle. "But I'm willing to try." Her shoulders visibly relaxed, a hopeful smile forming. "That's all I could ask for." Emily's visit stirred something within me, a longing for genuine reconciliation, not the superficial apologies driven by greed I'd received from others. Maybe this could be the fresh start my family needed, free from our uncle's toxic expectations. In the weeks that followed, I poured my energy into a project I dreamed about for years, a non-profit dedicated to helping young people who faced rejection and emotional abuse at home. I wanted them to know they weren't defined by the hurtful words or actions of others. I called it second chances, and it quickly became a haven, not only for those I sought to help, but also for myself. Every person who walked through those doors mirrored parts of my own journey: the pain, the anger, the desperation to be seen. The stories I heard reminded me of my own struggles, and each success within the organization felt like another piece of my past being rewritten. One evening, after finishing a late meeting, I heard an unexpected knock at my office door. My heart skipped when I saw who stood there. My uncle, looking strangely smaller, almost vulnerable. His once imposing presence seemed diminished, his proud shoulders slightly hunched. "What are you doing here?" I asked sharply, though inside I was trembling. He hesitated, clearing his throat. "I've heard about your charity. You're helping a lot of people." I eyed him skeptically. "Did you come here just to patronize me again?" He shook his head slowly. "No, I came here to say I was wrong." My breath caught in my throat, disbelief flooding my senses. Those were words I never expected from him. "Do you even mean that?" He took a step closer, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "I've spent my whole life pushing you, thinking being harsh would make you stronger. But seeing how much you've accomplished, not because of me, but in spite of me, has made me realize how wrong I've been." I could barely believe my ears. My uncle, the proud man who never admitted fault, was standing before me, humbled. Yet part of me resisted accepting his apology, wary of being hurt again. "You hurt me deeply," I whispered, tears rising despite my effort to fight them. "I've spent my life believing I wasn't enough because of you." "I know," he admitted, his voice breaking slightly. "I can't undo that, but I'd like to start again if you'll let me." The room seemed to shrink as I grappled with his words. Years of buried pain surged to the surface, but this time there was relief too. Relief that he'd finally acknowledged the damage he'd caused. "I can't pretend everything's fine," I told him firmly, "but maybe we can find a new way forward." He nodded quietly, accepting my conditions. "That's all I want." Over the next several months, my uncle genuinely tried. It wasn't easy. Old patterns of judgment and criticism were hard to break, but gradually a fragile trust formed through uncomfortable conversations and cautious attempts at understanding. We began to heal. My lottery winnings, initially viewed as just a stroke of luck, had transformed into something far greater, a catalyst for healing, not just for me, but for those around me. My nonprofit flourished, impacting hundreds of lives. Every smile from someone I'd helped reaffirmed that this was the path I'd always been meant to follow. 1 year later, at another family gathering, this time hosted at my home, I stood up once more. This time, in a room filled with warmth, not tension. My uncle's eyes met mine, pride finally shining genuinely in his gaze. "I've learned something invaluable," I began confidently, looking around at family and friends who had come together. "Success isn't defined by anyone else's expectations. It's about believing in yourself, even when no one else does. It's about kindness, second chances, and knowing your worth." The room erupted in heartfelt applause. Jason beamed proudly, Emily smiled encouragingly, and my uncle simply nodded, eyes filled with a quiet respect I'd longed for my entire life. As the evening drew to a close, my uncle approached, placing a gentle hand on my shoulder. "I'm proud of you. Truly, I smiled softly, feeling peace wash over me. Thank you. Winning the lottery had changed my life, but it was the strength I found within myself, the courage to face rejection and redefine my worth, that truly transformed everything. In the end, I didn't just surprise my family, I surprised myself. I turned my darkest moment into an empowering journey. Life isn't about proving your worth to those who refuse to see it. It's about recognizing your own value and forging your own path. True success isn't measured in wealth, but in the strength to rise above doubt, embrace second chances, and define yourself on your own terms. This story reminds us that the greatest victories come not from luck, but from resilience and self belief. Thank you for watching my channel. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to check out more inspiring and thought-provoking videos right here. The living room buzzed with the usual forced laughter and chatter of my relatives, but my heart pounded in my chest. The heart pounded in my chest. The air was thick with the lingering scent of jollof rice and fried plantains, remnants of dinner scattered across the dining table. My father's voice cut through the noise like a whip. "Zara, stand up!" he barked. All eyes turned to me. My face burned as I reluctantly stood, unsure of what I'd done this time. My parents never needed much of an excuse to make me their scapegoat. My harmless prank, announcing a fake inheritance check at dinner, was the perfect trigger. You thought that was funny. My father demanded, his face red with anger. Embarrassing us like that in front of the whole family. It was just a joke, I stammered, my voice trembling. I didn't mean, you didn't mean. My mother's voice was sharp, cutting through me like a blade. She stood near the mantel, her arms crossed tightly over her chest. "Do you think this family is a joke, Zara?" Before I could respond, my father grabbed a length of cord from the corner, the same one he often used to tie up loose household items. My stomach dropped as he stormed toward me. "Sit down!" he yelled, pointing at a chair in the middle of the room. Humiliated, I sank into the chair as he tied my wrists tightly. The rope bit into my skin, and I fought back tears. The flickering light from the old chandelier above cast harsh shadows on the walls. Laughter and murmurs rippled through the crowd of relatives. My younger brother Idris leaned against the wall, his arms crossed and a smirk on his face. "This," my father announced, gesturing toward me, "is what happens when you disrespect this family." The humiliation was unbearable. I bit my lip, refusing to cry in front of them. My parents' voices blurred into background noise as they continued to berate me. I wished the ground would swallow me whole. Then the door slammed open. The sharp sound silenced the room. Standing in the doorway was a man I hadn't seen in years, my Uncle Ease. Dressed in a tailored suit, he looked like he didn't belong in the chaos of this house. His piercing gaze swept over the scene, lingering on me and the ropes around my wrists. "What the hell is going on here?" he demanded, his voice low and dangerous. My father straightened his back, faltering for the first time. "Ease, this doesn't concern you." Ezzy stepped into the room. stepped into the room, his presence commanding. The silver cufflinks on his sleeves caught the dim light, glinting like tiny shields. It does now. The tension in the room was suffocating as Ease strode toward me. He crouched in front of me, his expression softening. "Are you okay, Zara?" I nodded, though my throat was tight with unshed tears. The faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen was the only sound as the room held its breath. E stood, turning to face my parents. "Untie her," he said, his voice cold and unyielding. "This is discipline." My mother argued. "She needs to learn discipline." Easy's voice rose slightly, his anger barely contained. "This isn't discipline. This is cruelty." My father hesitated, but Easy's glare left no room for argument. Grumbling under his breath, he loosened the ropes around my wrists. My arms fell free, and I rubbed at the red marks left behind, the skin already beginning to bruise. These turned to me. "Go pack your things." "What?" My mother's voice rose in disbelief. "You can't just take her." "Oh, I can," E said, his tone icy, "and I will. You've proven you don't deserve her." "You don't understand," my father started. But Ez cut him off. "No, Obi, I understand perfectly. I've watched you and Lami tear her down for years. That ends today." My parents exchanged a panicked look. They knew they couldn't challenge Ease. His wealth and influence far outweighed theirs, and they relied on him too much to risk alienating him completely. "This is a mistake," my mother hissed, her face twisted with anger. "The only mistake," he said, his voice calm but firm, "is the way you've treated your daughter." He turned back to me, his expression softening again. "You're coming with me. You don't belong here." I followed Ease out of the house, my steps hesitant at first, then quicker as the weight of the room behind me lifted. The cold night air hit my face like a breath of freedom. His sleek black car waited in the driveway, its headlights cutting through the darkness. As we reached the car, Ease opened the passenger door for me. "Get in," he said, his tone firm but kind. I slid into the seat, my heart pounding in my chest. The leather interior smelled faintly of mint and something more expensive, like polished wood and subtle cologne. Behind us, my parents stood on the porch, my mother's face twisted in fury while my father looked stunned, his usual bravado stripped away. Idris peeked out from behind them, his smirk gone, replaced by something that almost looked like regret. Ease climbed into the driver's seat and started the engine. The roar of the car drowned out the murmurs from the porch. As we pulled away, I glanced back, once, just once, to see my mother's silhouette shrinking into the distance. And then they were gone. "You don't need to look back anymore," E said, his voice steady. "You're free now." Izzy's estate was like stepping into a different reality. The house stood tall and majestic, surrounded by manicured gardens that seemed to stretch endlessly. The sleek architecture gleamed in the moonlight, and the warm glow from the windows made the mansion feel alive. "This is your home now," he said, as he unlocked the front door and led me inside. The interior was even more breathtaking: high ceilings, polished floors, and walls lined with bookshelves and art. Yet, for all its grandeur, the house didn't feel cold or imposing. It felt safe. A faint aroma of lavender lingered in the air, soothing my frayed nerves. "Come on," he said, gesturing for me to follow him up the grand staircase with its smooth mahogany railings. He showed me to a spacious guest room with a soft bed, a desk by the window, and a view of the sprawling gardens below, where solar-powered lanterns dotted the pathways like tiny stars. "Take your time settling in," he said. "We'll talk in the morning." As he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, overwhelmed. The events of the night replayed in my mind, the humiliation, the anger, and then ease stepping in like a shield I never knew I had. For the first time in years, I felt a flicker of hope. The morning sun poured through the windows, bathing the room in golden light. The faint chirping of birds outside added a peaceful backdrop to the morning stillness. For a moment, I forgot where I was. Then, the memories of the previous night came rushing back. I found ease in the dining room, seated at a long table, set with breakfast. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee and warm bread filled the air. He glanced up as I entered, a warm smile spreading across his face. "Good morning," he said. "Did you sleep well?" I nodded, though my sleep had been restless, haunted by dreams I couldn't quite remember. "Thank you for everything." He waved a hand dismissively. "You don't have to thank me, Zara. What they did to you was wrong. It's my job to make sure you're safe now." As we ate, Eve began to ask me questions, gentle, probing questions about my interests, my dreams, the things I'd never had the chance to explore. The soft clink of cutlery against porcelain punctuated our conversation. For the first time, someone wanted to know who I was, not who they wanted me to be. "What do you love?" he asked. I hesitated, the question catching me off guard. I I used to love writing, I admitted. When I was younger, I'd write stories all the time. But my parents said it was a waste of time. But my parents said it was a waste of time. Ez's expression darkened, but his voice remained calm. They were wrong. If writing makes you happy, you should do it. A few days later, E sat me down in his study. The room smelled faintly of old books and cedar, the shelves lined with novels, biographies, and leather-bound journals. "I've been thinking," he said. "You've been through a lot, Zara, more than anyone should have to. I want you to consider therapy." Therapy. The word felt foreign, almost taboo. My parents had always dismissed mental health as an indulgence for the weak. But Ez's tone wasn't dismissive. It was caring, encouraging. "I know it's a lot to think about," he continued, "but it could help. You don't have to carry this alone." I hesitated, but something in his voice reassured me. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll try." Idris arranged for me to see Dr. Lamy Carter, a therapist he trusted. Her office was cozy and inviting, a stark contrast to the sterile, intimidating spaces I'd imagined therapy to be. A soft rug covered the floor, and sunlight streamed through the large window, illuminating potted plants that lined the sill. During our first session, she let me talk at my own pace, her gentle demeanor putting me at ease. "I've always felt like I wasn't enough," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "No matter what I did, it was never good enough for them." Dr. Carter nodded, her expression kind but serious. "That's a heavy burden to carry, but it's not yours to bear. Zara, their treatment of you says more about them than it does about you." Her words lingered with me long after the session ended, planting the first seeds of healing. With therapy giving me the tools to process my pain, Idris encouraged me to dive back into writing. He set up a small writing nook in my room, complete with a new laptop and shelves stocked with books on storytelling and creativity. A soft desk lamp cast a warm glow over the space. "Consider this your space," he said. "No pressure. Just write what feels right." At first, the words came slowly. I hadn't written in years, and the blank page felt intimidating. But as I let myself sink into the process, something shifted. Writing became a refuge, a way to process my emotions and reclaim my voice. One evening, I showed Idris a short story I'd written, a tale of a girl who escaped a tower and